Alright. TikTok, TikTok. Go. Alright, just waiting for the video to unfreeze. I think we got it going. Alright, so let's get into part 10, right? We are 1/3 of the way finished with Judges. Like I said, this has been an arduous journey getting through Judges. I think in part due to the fact that it's a little bit out of chronological order. I had mentioned the book of Judges spans over a great length of time, but it's also not chronological. Sometimes we go back, a little bit to the beginning, and then we go into the middle part, and then towards the end. So it's hard to gain perspective in this one, and we are jumping from story to story, narrative to narrative, fairly quickly. Again, looking at different times here. But here we are going to talk about the Danites. We're going to talk about Micah, not to be confused with the prophet Micah. This is somebody else who lived in a certain territory of Ephraim. It's not saying what tribe he belongs to. I don't know. I think he's outside of the Israelite community, from what I can gather. And we are also going to talk about the Levite tribes, which we know during the period of inheritance they were scattered about. There was no set land for the Levites. They lived with the different tribes, acting as priests for the various tribes of Israel. So we're just going to go over some quickish narrative today, starting out with a poem, quote poem, another Sir John Betjeman. This is from, I think, 1945, after Googling it. Again, this is using a lot of Middle English, Old English. So I was going to see if I can just read it from the computer. I thought I had the tab up, but it's called Parliament Hillfields. So as we can gather from Sir John Benjamin, he's an Englishman, right? So that's why Parliament writes English, and then all the other references throughout his poems were also English, right? We talked about, I'm not going to go back, but you guys, Oxford, and there was another place in England. Anyways, so we're using a lot of terms here. It's just kind of difficult sometimes to place, but let's go ahead and just read through it, and I'll give a little bit of a relationship / backstory here. It says, rumbling under blackened girders, midland bound for Cricklewood, puffed its sulphur to the sunset where that land of laundry stood. Rumble under, thunder over, train and tram alternate go, shape the floor and smudge the ledger, Sherrington, Sells, Dale and Co. Nuts and nuggets in the window, trucks along the lines below. So, from the imagery that I'm getting, the words that are used sounds very much like transportation, right? Train, tram, rumbling, nuts and nuggets. It sounds like an engine, transportation, traveling. So this is quite far in advance compared to what we're talking about here in the Bible, but we can gather the sense of traveling a long distance, right? Bringing something to somebody, having a really heavy footprint and making a lot of noise as you're running through different towns, right? So this is kind of what's going on with the Danites, as we'll discuss. They're rumbling about, causing a ruckus, traveling from place to place. And we'll learn about why in a second. As I'm reading these quotes, it's like, what had inspired me to write down these certain quotes? They do, pretty well relate to everything that we're talking about, even if it's a little bit far-fetched. Somehow, some way, we can tie them into each story here. I guess it's just a way to break up the monotony just a little bit. But again, what inspired me to write these specific lines and quotes down at the time I was under some heavy medication, let's just put it that way. I really was, medicated. I had no idea what to do besides pass the time of boredom and just write, lines from this encyclopedia, essentially, of quotes. So that's just a little perspective as to why these are relevant and what was going on. Super, super bored. They're on the back of some St. Vincent's hospital paperwork. You guys, I'm telling you, the last few years has been a journey. I'm just grateful that has ceased. Whatever that journey was, it's over now. But yes, let's go ahead and get into this section, part 10 of Judges. Alright, let's get back to my Facebook here. So starting out in chapter 17, it says, "Now this man had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods, and installed one of his sons as a priest. In those days Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit." So this is referring to Micah. I left out the first part, but this is referring to Micah. He had a shrine and a ephod and made some household gods out of some silver that his mother had given him. It says, a young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living with the clan of Judah, left that town in search for some other place to stay. On his way he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and be my father and priest. I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. So, just I guess a little backstory on who Micah was. It doesn't really say whether I don't think he was an Israelite, just because he's not assigned to any kind of tribe. He's just somebody living in Ephraim. And of course, as it says, he has his household gods and a shrine, but he was also a believer in the Lord, which is interesting. But oftentimes people did both. They saw God as like God, right? Almost like he was out of touch or out of reach from them. So they instilled these household gods and shrines, something that was more personal to them, I would say. Again, it is backwards thinking, but for them it just made sense with their lifestyle. So, who am I to judge? But it definitely wasn't something that God was recommending, or, he was actually very against it. Anyways, because for the reason being that God wanted to be the personal God, right? God was, in fact, a personal God, but he felt like he was so far removed from a lot of the happenings that were going on, and people were just ignoring him in a sense and not giving him his due position. So anyways, the Levite comes, lives with the man, and Micah actually said too, he's like, "The Lord will be pleased that I have a Levite as my priest." He did acknowledge the Lord, and he said, "This will help me appease God, the God, right? Because I have a Levite." So there is reference to the fact that these people who weren't Israelites or who were worshiping other gods, there is reference to them acknowledging to some extent the Lord. But like I said, it was almost like an intimidation factor for them. It was, he was too far up, they couldn't ever contact him. He was too glorious for them to even, I don't know. It's backwards thinking, like I said, but you know what I'm saying. They were just out of touch. Anyways. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So this part confused me, because I do explicitly remember the Danites receiving land. Actually, I did look it up just to make sure, but it is in Joshua. The Danites did receive land, but there was a clause in there where they had actually lost it. So they lost it, and somehow they did get it back, but then lost it again, and now they're looking for new land, essentially. So they had some scouts. It says here they're scouts. So 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw the people living in safety, like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. and since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. So the 5 scouts from the tribe of Dan went and they saw Laish, and they liked the land. They're going back to report to the rest of the tribe and to gather men. It was about 600 men to go with them, and they essentially were going to take over this peaceful land, which is like, right, you don't really want to do that, but let's go on. It says, from there they went on to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, Do you know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. Okay, so it seems like here that the Danites are passing judgment, right? It seems like maybe they are taking this idol to go ahead and destroy, and to teach Micah a lesson. But we'll learn that that's not the case. They were, again, backwards in their thinking, and this was a tribe of Israel. But something about the Danites, the fact that they were losing the land and they were getting, taken over and pushed out, something about the Danites just was not working out, apparently. Stood at the entrance of the gate. It says, then they took what Micah had made and his priest, and went on to Laish against the people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword and burnt down their city. So again, this is not really something that we see as okay. Even though this has happened before with other people and places and things, we kind of excuse it because, these were bad people. They needed to, be pushed out, or they needed to be dominated, that sort of thing. But in this case, this group of people was peaceful and secure. It doesn't mention that they were, worshiping other gods or anything like that, but it just mentioned that, they were in a very good place. So for the Danites to do that, can see that as not such a smart decision. And then it says here, there the Danites set up for themselves the idol, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of the captivity of the land. So not only do they have Micah's Levite, right, that Micah was serving, they also have the grandson of Moses with them. And yes, you heard that correctly. They took the idol, right? Thinking, in our heads, we're thinking, they're going to destroy it. They're going to be against that sort of practice. They took the idol and started using it for themselves. They started using the idols and the household gods and whatever else they took from Micah, and they started to use it themselves. So again, that goes to show that their thinking is also backwards. It was misguided. The fact that they took away this peaceful city and then they continue to do idolatry and worship like that doesn't really make much sense. It goes to show you too just the difference in generations, right? This was 2 generations later, and we actually have another Levite, the son of Moses, there with them. So it goes to show you it doesn't necessarily matter how strong your lineage is and what connections you have, because Moses was such a great and faithful being, but his grandson, not only 2 generations later, was really misguided. And it's unfortunate to think that can take place, but it's much more common than you think. So again, just we like to be able to associate people with their lineages, but that doesn't mean that all of their qualities and morals will be identical. Certainly not according to this. But that's it. That's all I have to say. It's kind of a strange story, but I guess it needed to be spoken about and recorded. It is very unusual in a way. It just doesn't really give us that satisfaction of being a good ending or a good story, especially for the tribe of Dan. They seem a little bit all over the place. Okay, well, God bless you guys. Thank you for listening. I will hope to catch you very soon. Have a great Sunday.